So how we first met, we had a cup of coffee at Common Ground here in town, but 3.5 years earlier, somebody had tried to set us up. Autumn Ferris had tried to set us up, and apparently she's persistent, because 3.5 years went by and she remembered, and she suggested again that we have a cup of coffee together, or at least get to know one another. And so that was when we first met. That was our first date, was here at Common Ground in town. So during those 3.5 years, we look back on those now, and we've talked about it a lot, that those 3.5 years were no accident. You know, we clearly see God preparing each of us during those 3.5 years. So that it's just like a really, really fun fact for us to be able to look back and say, well, we were supposed to meet here, but we ended up meeting here, but we can see God's hand in all of it. And so we ended up talking that day over coffee for, if I remember correctly, close to 2 hours, which is a testimony of how much I can talk. As cliche as it sounds, I remember thinking that day, you know, it's just, I hate to see this conversation end. Could have literally talked all day, which is rare. There's very few people I can sit down with and talk with for an extended period of time. Either they get annoyed with me or I get annoyed with them. So that was a very good sign. And then from there, just 7 months later, here we are. So.
And just like Caleb said, we were encouraged to meet by a member of the church, Autumn Ferris, and I believe that she deserved that shout out. But yeah, she had reached out to me about 3.5 years ago through Facebook and wanted me to come to Baxley Free Will for a service, or at least come to meet Caleb. And nothing ever came from it, because a few months later decided to move to Wisconsin. So I moved there just a couple months later. Ended up moving back home, and after doing ministry in Baxley for about a year, Autumn had reached out to my sister, and I guess she didn't think that anything would come from reaching out to me again, but she reached out to Emily, and so Caleb and I met. That was in March of this year. And so March 19th we went and had coffee for the first time, and so we've been dating ever since. But the most amazing part, just like Caleb said, was the fact that Autumn had reached out to us several years ago and it didn't work out, but what God took both Caleb and I through individually during those 3.5 years, little did we know that He was preparing us for each other. We're just amazed at God's faithfulness, and the way that His plans are so much better than anything that we could come up with on our own.
When I think about Kristen, I think the thing that stands out, well, I know the thing that stands out most would be just humility, and I'll tie that with modesty. I know technically that's two answers, but just the way that she carries herself, and the way that she interacts with others, and just how she conducts herself every day, day in and day out, in a consistent fashion, is just a great example of what godly humility and modesty as a woman is. And there have been others that have actually bragged about that quality that she has to me, my dad being one of them. She seeks to serve in humility, and whoever she comes into contact with, whether it's in the church, whether it's outside of the church, you know, wherever. If she's at work, you know, you can always tell that she is seeking to love others and serve them in a spirit of humility. And so that's definitely the number one thing that stands out to me when I think about Kristen.
The thing that stands out to me the most about Caleb, well, there are lots of things, but the first that I think of is from the very first time we met, the very first day that we met at Common Ground, just seeing his love for God and his love for God's Word. The first character quality that comes to mind is just his selflessness. He truly, from day one, has put my needs above his own. And also, early on in our relationship, we both read Ephesians together and just kind of wrote down different things that stood out to us and went through it together. And chapter 5 talks about the husband loving his bride as Christ loves his church. And Caleb truly loves me like Christ loves his church.
What excites me most about serving or ministering together, I think a word that has really stood out to both of us, we've had numerous conversations about the word balance. The longer we were together, we got to know each other, we started really realizing that we're not just balanced in the everyday aspects of life. There really is a spiritual balance there. And I'll go back to the fact that her humility is something that really stands out to me. Pride is something that I struggle with. And so one of the first things that I realized was that her constant example of humility was just a constant reminder from God in my life that, hey, you struggle with this, and she's an example. So always remember, crush that pride anytime that it rears its ugly head. I'm not a very, and she will agree with this, I'm not a very clean person. I'm not a tidy person. Not clean in that I don't take baths or anything, but clean that I'm not tidy around the house and everything else. And she loves to clean and keep everything organized.
Favorite thing.
She doesn't cook, well, she bakes, but she doesn't cook a lot. I love cooking.
I'm excited to come alongside of him in the ministry that he already has here at Baxley Free Will. And I'm excited to watch God shape us both, using each other, shape us both into who he wants us to be. And I'm excited that even on the really good days and on the days that might be hard, that God is still faithful.